What is going on here? What is this $1 billion heist? Involves Minnesota and a name that seems to can't get out of the news over the last week or so, and that is Tim Walz.
A group of workers at the Minnesota Department of Human Services has even been calling him out publicly through an X account they created, saying, listen, we told him about all this fraud. We told him this was going on, and the governor's office did nothing. And in fact, they retaliated against people that were doing this. And I think it's so rich because he was on Meet the Press on Sunday. And Kristen Welker, to her credit, asked, do you take responsibility for all this? Because it's so much money.
You think it goes political? You think he swerves this? I don't know. Maybe he'll answer truthfully and honestly and just clean and blunt, and let's see. Bite one.
Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals.
I take responsibility for putting people in jail.
You know what my biggest problem with that is, Logan,
political swerve
is also that he's saying, look, we're just doing so great in Minnesota. Criminals want to come here.
Yeah.
They just want to come here because we're doing so great, as if it's not like, no, as you've seen, as I've been governor, that we have put in place mechanisms to stop this fraud, to stop this. It's like, we're just doing so good. We can't even keep up with all the criminals coming here. Man, that's the biggest indictment on the left's policies for crime I've ever heard in my life.
We're so our business is so successful. What do you expect them not to loot?
What are your biggest weaknesses? This is the Tim Walz job interview. We're just so successful that criminals want to be here. That's how weak we are.
I do take responsibility for putting bad guys in jail. It is just another one of these sad instances where, of course, we are seeing this. And where did that money potentially go to? To terrorist regimes or to al-Shabaab?
The U.S. Treasury is now investigating allegations of this fraud in Minnesota. They have a big fraud scandal going on there between their Medicaid fraud situation that's going on, as well as this COVID relief fraud. This is where a large organization, Feeding Our Future, used over $1 billion in COVID relief to help what was supposed to be people that were food insecure or needed food assistance. And instead, they enriched themselves off of it, created fake profiles, fake documents to just siphon off this, what was supposed to be COVID relief money. And now the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, is saying, at my direction, U.S. Treasury is investigating allegations that under the feckless mismanagement of the Biden administration and Governor Tim Walz, hardworking Minnesotans' tax dollars may have been diverted to the terrorist organization al-Shabaab. Thanks to the leadership of Donald Trump, we are acting fast to ensure Americans' taxes are not funding acts of global terror. We will share our findings as our investigation continues.
Not a good week for Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Feels like he can't catch a break here.
This is not Donald Trump driving this. This was whistleblowers in Minnesota who work in that office, probably many of them who are not conservatives, who have just said this fraud is horrible. We tried to tell him, and he retaliated.
And is going to what looks to be al-Shabaab, which does make sense if you see the current sort of population of what's going on in Minnesota in general.
And when our Treasury Secretary is saying that, again, this is not a talking head. This is not just a thing on X. Treasury Secretary, I mean, he is a highly respected guy. Huge role, of course, Scott Bessent. I mean, he would not be saying words like al-Shabaab and money getting there out of our taxpayer dollars if they didn't feel like there's something wrong going on there.
Even bureaucrats within the state of Minnesota have put up a Twitter account, an X account, that is basically a bunch of whistleblowers from the Department of Human Services. Now, Department of Human Services, a lot of bureaucrats. It's a more left-leaning state, obviously, Minnesota. But also, a lot of them are social workers, things of that nature, that are, even in that field, that profession, you have people that are more left-leaning, that may have agreed with and voted for Tim Walz, are calling him out publicly on this, saying that they were warning the governor's office of all this, and that not only were they shut down or not listened to, a lot of times they were retaliated against for being whistleblowers. How does this tie into what we're looking at here? When you think about what we're fighting in California, we are fighting a government that is still pursuing $1.2 million against a church for COVID regulation lockdown policy violations, most of which were later deemed unconstitutional. They're still trying to take that money.
Yeah, the Calvary Chapel.
If you think that Minnesota's alone in having this massive fraud scheme where COVID money, taxpayer dollars, was just being given out and going for fraudulent criminal activity, then you are delusional, because we know that this is happening all over the country, especially in the places that had looser regulations on how they were giving out the money, places like California. So you think California is fixated on trying to get this $1.2 million from this church, when maybe they should be seeing if they had similar NGOs that were set up directly to steal from taxpayers.
The population of California, we know there was fraud that was occurring. Everyone knows it occurred everywhere. But were there mass-scale frauds in specific communities where the government leaders looked the other way because they looked to those communities, especially as Democrats, as core supporters? This is the kind of the Ilhan Omar world, the Rashida Tlaib world. They look and say, to keep them on board, we kind of let them do their own thing and look the other way. I've said, they've implemented almost like Sharia in these places like in Minnesota and in places like Dearborn in Michigan. And it's been happening. Really, it's not something new. It's just getting more extreme and more exposed.
Imagine how much more waste, fraud, and abuse we would have at this point if the vice president were someone like Tim Walz that clearly was unable to get a handle on even the state government level to the tune of $1 billion in one case that they're investigating. Just imagine how much worse for wear our country and our budget and the fiscal health of our country, which after decades of bad policy isn't in a good place per se. Imagine where it could be. And that's why these things have to be exposed. People have to be held accountable for it. But also, I don't think it needs to stop at Minnesota. When you see how aggressively that the Gavin Newsom regime in California is going after a church for fines, and where are these investigations there? We need to get to the bottom of where all this fraud was taking place and what bad actors it was potentially going to.
I think what you want to do here is let the federal government, it's on their radar now, focus on this issue with Walz. And then the federal government can certainly open up investigations into other financial wrongdoings in his administration, especially if there are whistleblowers willing to come forward. We would not have known this information, but there are good bureaucrats. There are good government employees in the world who do want to make sure that your tax dollars aren't being wasted. Not only are they not being wasted through fraud, but that they're not going via fraud to organizations that are terrorist organizations that want to kill Americans, that again, try to restrict our shipping capabilities, all of that. So again, he's now on the radar for a legitimate reason. Minnesotans blew the whistle in his own. He retaliated, supposedly. That's what they said, against them. So there's a lot to investigate here.